So you're on a mission to really revolutionize the way that the water industry works.
Yes.
Right? And people talk about big pharma, people talk about big tech, big oil, but people don't really consider that there's such thing as big water.
Well, shortly, yes, there's a lot of resistance from all the incumbents. And so I could talk a little bit about the problem that we have. Our kids are getting programmed into drinking things like bottled water or worse, sugary, carbonated, caffeinated drinks that are wrapped in plastic. And that starts at a really young age. And if you look at sugar, it actually hits the same receptor sites as heroin does. It's incredibly addictive and it creates these lifelong dependencies. And so tied to that is we have a fundamental issue in the United States with clean drinking water. It does not exist. And it's full of pharmaceuticals, herbicides, pesticides, microplastics, nanoplastics, chromium-6, lead. And so that's part of the problem that we're solving for. And there are a lot of people that are profiting off of that problem.
When you were growing up as a kid, like was bottled water a thing?
No.
What's up, man? Thanks for coming on.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
So I saw you walk in with a single-use plastic bottle.
Just kidding. Yeah, no, never, ever. I got my refillable here.
So you're on a mission to really revolutionize the way that the water industry works.
Yes.
Right? And people talk about big pharma, people talk about big tech, big oil, but people don't really consider that there's such thing as big water, right? We have companies that own a massive part of the industry.
Right.
So I'm curious with your mission, what you're doing, like, are you facing pushback from kind of that old industry, and where do you see this going in the next 5 or 10 years?
Well, shortly, yes, there's a lot of resistance from all the incumbents. And so I could talk a little bit about the problem that we have, perhaps as a starting point. Sure. Which is, I co-founded the company based on an experience that I had with my daughters in San Francisco. So they were playing soccer and they were 9 and 10 at the time. And I grew up in Columbus, Ohio. So, when you grow up in the Midwest, you kind of think all Californians just like eat bark and wheatgrass, drink wheatgrass juice and just do nothing other than healthy things for their bodies. And the reality is like kids in California behave like kids in Ohio and kids in Texas, and kids are kids. And so what has happened, and I learned this through just like a very short period of kind of exploration and a little bit of a personal epiphany for me, where our kids are getting programmed into drinking things like bottled water or worse, sugary, carbonated, caffeinated drinks that are wrapped in plastic. And that starts at a really young age. And if you look at sugar, it actually hits the same receptor sites as heroin does. It's incredibly addictive and it creates these lifelong dependencies. And so tied to that is we have a fundamental issue in the United States with clean drinking water. It does not exist. And it's full of pharmaceuticals, herbicides, pesticides, microplastics, nanoplastics, chromium-6, lead. And so that's part of the problem that we're solving for. And there are a lot of people that are profiting off of that problem, right? And so you've got big beverage companies, big bottled water, which I really compare to a modern day cigarette. I mean, single-use plastics are the new environmental cigarette. If you looked at how big tobacco kind of marketed to kids in the 50s, 60s, 70s, legislated, lobbied, et cetera, a lot of those same things are going on today. And so our job is to break that ecosystem. And that's really what FloWater is. We're focused on transforming tap water and delivering the world's best tasting, most trusted drinking water anywhere consumers work, rest, and play, and to get people to fall in love with water again.
So I think that most people agree that there's some problem with the water right now. And how old are you?
I'm 51.
51. Okay. So when you were growing up as a kid, like was bottled water a thing?
No. In fact, I mean, kind of the running joke is that like all of us were drinking out of hoses and we felt fine about it, right? And so there was no, I think I remember Perrier maybe coming out when I was like 10 years old, or at least I'd learned of Perrier when I was 10, 12, 14. But bottled, I mean, in fact, this is one of those things that, 50 years ago and before, even 35 years ago, bottled water didn't exist. And so this was created partly because there was a marketing opportunity there, right? Which is you can bottle something up, wrap it in plastic, ship it all over the world, charge 1,000 times markup, put a cool brand around it, and make a lot of money. And that's what big beverage and big bottled water companies did. But then part of it has been propagated by the fact that Americans, even in the United States, we do not have clean drinking water. And so, 30, 50 years ago, people used to think this was an international issue or this is an overseas issue. This is a third world country issue. For sure, there's substantial issues that exist there. But even in our own backyard, if you look at, I'll give you two quick stats on this. One, about 56% of Americans in the last few years have been drinking water with lead in it. I mean, that is absolutely unconscionable. In fact, the American Academy of Pediatrics says that the acceptable number of parts per billion for lead in tap water for kids is 0. It's 0. And yet to this day, there's still no federal mandate for lead testing in schools. And so those are things that need to be solved, and they need to be solved today, because part of the problem is that we have an infrastructure issue that's not going to get solved for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, and it's $1 trillion project. So most people on the right or the left politically don't really want to touch this in substantial ways because you can't get it solved in 1, 2, 3 terms. It's a multi-decade problem that needs to be solved. So we need to work towards that, because if we don't start today, tomorrow will never come, certainly not 10, 20, 30 years from now. But the premise behind FloWater is, well, we can solve that problem with today's technology that we've developed by deploying a FloWater refill station and effectively changing the last 6 feet of distributed decentralized water lines.
So many of your stations are in, I think if anyone's ever used like a hotel gym at, they're there, right? They're in lobbies of hotels, they're in schools, right? They're in government facilities, they're all over.
Yes.
Right. And I bet most people watching or listening have probably unknowingly used one of your machines in the United States.
That's probably the case. In fact, today, just a few hours ago, we announced that we hit a major milestone for the company, which is 1 billion single-use plastic water bottles have been saved from the oceans, lakes, rivers, and landfills as a result of FloWater fills.
Congratulations. I know that was a big goal for you.
It was so
awesome.
big. I mean, I remember the time when it was like 10,000. We were doing high fives, and when the ticker hit 10,000, we had like 3 units in the market. We got 10,000, then 100,000 was the big goal, and then 1 million was the big goal.
So what's the goal now?
I think we're going to establish 10. 10 billion is going to be the number. So a billion is just a marker, right? It's not a pinnacle of achievement. It's just a marker.
I can retire now, right?
Yeah, exactly. No, we're just starting. I mean, it's like literally a drop in the ocean, and it's a big drop in the ocean, but we've got a lot of ways to go. And so 10 billion is the next number.
So with water, obviously we have to stay hydrated. We have to drink water, right? We're what, like 70% water as humans.
Yep.
Here are the solutions, right? We have for me, right? I can drink water out of my tap, right? I can drink water from a bottle, right? Those are kind of the two solutions right now. Within each, we have subcategories, right? If I drink from the tap, I can have reverse osmosis. I can have, and then from bottle, I could have, plastic bottle, glass bottle, spring water, purified, distilled, all the, X, Y, Z. I have a problem with tap water, especially in Vegas. I don't know if you know the
very high
situation.
TDS level here, among other things.
And we have bomb testing not too far away. There's radioactive stuff in our water. There's heavy chlorine, you can taste it. There's fluoride in the water. So what a lot of people do is they do RO, reverse osmosis water. Here's the problem I have it. I feel like reverse osmosis water is actually, we call it hungry water, where it's actually stripping minerals because water maintains memory, right? So we strip it from everything and then we consume it. It's actually going to be absorbing nutrients, and actually I don't feel like reverse osmosis water is hydrating.
Right.
So then people say, well, you can add minerals back in. It's like, okay, maybe that's a solution. So when we look at the landscape of what we have a problem. You're solving it to some extent. What's like the ideal case? Do we all have a natural wellspring, like digging down to the ground?
Actually, that is in an ideal world. We live in a world, if we were to live in a world without contaminants. And so if you look at just something like glyphosate, commonly known as Roundup, used in the 70s, you can find that in much of the tap water that you drink today. And that's just one example. In fact, I'll give you another example that just shows you how pointed the data is. In the United States today, there are over 60,000 chemicals that are used for the production of a lot of different things. Less than 100 of those 60,000 plus chemicals are actually regulated by the Safe Drinking Water Act of 1974, which has hardly been updated since then. So if you just see the magnitude of that, so like fluoride is just one issue, and like some people are on the right and the left kind of side of that perspective, whether fluoride is beneficial. I think most people would say, though, if you could get fluoride to your teeth, but without getting it into your stomach and your neuroplasticity, that would be a good thing. I think almost everyone would agree on that. But then you got 10,000 and thousands of other contaminants that are in there. And so the solution really is, if you can't have a deep rock spring in your backyard that's free of contaminants and has pure organic virgin soil, and that is the ideal scenario, then what you really need to do is you have to treat your water twice, right? And so what treating your water twice means is once it gets from the municipal water line, if you're on a municipal line, the vast majority of Americans are in the restaurant
AKA
wells,
a tap.
right? Yeah, a tap, any type of faucet, basically. Once you get it to the faucet, it has to be treated twice. I mean, that's literally what we're down to in the United States, which is you should not drink water out of the tap. You shouldn't drink water out of a bottle either. I mean, there's a lot of issues with microplastics and nanoplastics in bottled water and sitting and baking.
Is that where my breasts are coming from?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is where all our breasts are coming from. Yeah, I mean, it's actually there are estrogen receptors. I mean, there's estrogen in the plastics. In fact, cigarettes. I'll just put one other data point out there. In the production of cigarettes, there are 6,000 chemicals that go into the production of nicotine and tobacco products that go into cigarettes. There are 10,000 chemicals that go into the production of the plastics that your water is wrapped in when you're drinking a bottle of water. And so if you look at rising estrogen levels, a lot of people speculate this is one of the reasons why men have lower testosterone and higher estrogen levels today is because of not just this one issue, but a multitude of issues, of which this is one of those. And so the solution is you've got to treat your water twice. You have to. And so there's a variety of ways to do this. You can do this with like a water pitcher filter. You can do this with an RO under sink system. We can talk a little bit about what those are. What I would say is if you've got like kind of a fridge filter on a scale of 1 to 10, that's probably a 2. If you've got a filter that's in your pitcher, it's just a single stage carbon on a scale of 1 to 10, that's like a 1. So it's better than nothing, provided that you change it regularly, because otherwise that turns into a little bit of a petri dish. But it's not going to do a lot. Like, for example, here in Las Vegas, you've got TDS levels, total dissolved solids. These are the inorganic solids that are actually dissolved in the water that you're drinking that make it taste kind of rancid at some cases. And that doesn't even include things like chlorine. A single stage carbon filter will take the TDS from 650 here down to like 649. Like it barely touches it, right? So you need to go through more advanced filtration, be able to improve that tap water considerably. So that might look like using ultrafiltration, nanofiltration. Those are better. Those are like 4, 5, 6 out of a scale of 1 to 10. Reverse osmosis is like a 7, 8, or 9. It's a 10. It's a 10, except if you don't remineralize, I drop it down to like a 6 or 7 because your body has to have electrolytes in order to assimilate that water and to hydrate yourself. Otherwise, it's robbing them out of your body. And you're exactly right on that. So the ideal scenario now is really having an RO system or some form of RO with remineralization so that you can bioassimilate all of that.
Is that like trace minerals?
Yeah, so what you really need to have are 4 primary electrolytes: calcium, potassium, magnesium, and sodium, and then trace minerals on top of that. And so that's what we've put into a FloWater refill station. So I'm not going to go through all 7 stages of the FloWater filter and purification system, but effectively does one of 3 things. One is it's just stripping all of the contaminants out. FloWater removes pharmaceuticals, herbicides, pesticides, all the way down to 0.0001 microns. Like that is incredibly tiny. Microplastics are 1 micron and larger, basically. Nanoplastics are smaller than 1 micron. So FloWater is extracting all of that from the tap water, regardless of what your starting water is. In fact, we could hook a FloWater device up to a pond or a putrid lake or something like that, and I would be comfortable drinking out of it. It's hard to do that at scale because the filters get clogged if you're using that type of contaminative water. But then the second set of filters that FloWater goes through is everything from ozone to remineralization. So we put those 4 primary electrolytes that I told you about earlier back into the water. So those are the electrolytes and those are the dissolved solids that you want to have in your water that are used for bioassimilation, as well as about a dozen different trace minerals. And then it goes through a finishing filter, which is basically carbonated coconut shell. And that makes it just taste really clean and crisp and better than bottled water. So we think that's the
That's
solution.
where coconut water comes from, right?
Yeah. Well, it's part of the it's somewhat directly related, right? But I mean, sometimes people see the coconut carbon filter and they think, oh, I'm going to get a little coconut taste. You're unfortunately not going to get any coconut taste.
If I'm allergic to nuts, does it?
No, it doesn't actually.
No issue there?
It's the meat. So the pulp is what people are allergic to, not the shell. So there's no allergy issue with that whatsoever.
Okay. So what do people do at home? Because I think your machines are...
It's all B2B. Yeah, our business
very
is
expensive too, I think.
Well, it depends on how you define expensive. So I mean, if it's a 3-person, shop,
if it's my podcast studio.
Look, for less than the price of a latte a day, you could have a FloWater refill station in here. So I think it kind of depends on how much you end up valuing water. But if we're looking at the cost of it, so a FloWater refill station, we typically lease them. Typically, customers lease them for 3 to 5 years. Sometimes we'll sell them as well. When we lease them, it's $5 a day for unlimited water, effectively. And so when you break it down on a daily basis and you look at all the money that you spend on, everything from like staplers, pens and pencils, or lattes and coffees and whatnot. It's really not that much on a per gallon basis, incredibly inexpensive. But on the home side, going back to your question about what do you do at the home? Absolutely.
You can pull it too. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Hang on a second. Let me do this. So on the home side, though, going back to that, I mean, I would say do something, right? So like if you're going to use, even if you use the single stage carbon filter that goes into a pitcher filter or a fridge filter, as long as you change it every 3, 6, 9 months, whatever the interval recommends on the manufacturer's packaging, that's better than nothing. I mean, something is better than nothing. So like you're kind of moving in the right direction if you do that. And I think in an ideal situation for the home, and in fact, a lot of people will text me saying, hey, what do you recommend for the house? And so I have this laundry list of 8 different products or 6 different products that I recommend. Some are $50 and under, some are $50 to $500, some are $500 and up. We have a sister company, our parent company, FloWater, which is based in Stockholm, Sweden, that makes under-sink systems for the home that are incredibly effective, and so sometimes I recommend those. But I just put them on the list.
Or it's
RO.
It's
a proprietary form of RO called superior osmosis, and so hooking that thing up with remineralization.
Isn't that a name? That's a marketing guy came up with that.
Yeah, it's a clever market. I mean, we have the same thing. We call ours advanced osmosis, but it is different than reverse osmosis. So like the FloWater system, we use an RO kind of infrastructure, but what it does is it dispenses up to 5 times more water than a conventional RO system. So that's one of the downsides of typical RO systems is they're really slow. So you develop latency.
You try to fill a cup up.
Yeah, and
try
it's
to fill
dripping.
that bottle will take a minute.
I know. Yeah, that's why you have to have a holding tank, and then you have to have something that's like a booster pump or some type of accelerant to that. So that's part of what the FloWater guys call it superior osmosis. We call it advanced osmosis. The other thing, though, is RO has wastewater, right? And so you want to waste as little as possible. It's the byproduct water. It's the stuff that you don't want to be drinking. And so I don't have any issue having byproduct water out of an RO system because that contains the very chemicals that you do not want to be drinking. I mean, it's either going back into reclamation or it's going through your kidneys, right? So all of us should take reclamation 10 out of 10 times, but you want to limit that as much as possible. And so that's some of the functions of our advanced osmosis system are more efficient with RO byproduct water. But going back to the consumer household, I think having an RO system with remineralization is the best thing. There's some countertop units that do RO as well that are plug and play. I recommend those to people. So if someone can get into RO or some form of RO, then that is the gold standard for purified water. And that's over half of bottled water is pure, RO water. And then the other half is like spring water.
Well, bottled, but there's a lot of it that's just straight out of the tap,
It is, yeah. I mean, it's tap, and then they typically run it through an RO process if they're.
Is that what purified water is?
Yeah, exactly. That is exactly it. Yeah, but so much of it is a racket. I mean, over half of bottled water is literally tap water, and then they're just wrapping it in plastic, 1,000 times markup, shipping it all over the world. I mean, if you look at Fiji, I mean, it's even like more audacious, which is like we're taking water from people in their local communities, shipping it halfway across the globe, putting it in plastic, shipping it out. It's kind of madness, and this is why it's the new environmental cigarette.
My buddy lives in Hawaii, and on his property they have a river, and in their deed, it's like the last property on the island, the furthest on the end of it, and they have in their deed they can have I think 25,000 gallons a day that they're allowed to extract for sale.
Does he sell it?
He doesn't, and they don't. And because it's literally the end of the island, you have to drive down like a 1-lane road, and they were like considering like how powerful this would be, but they would literally be like destroying like that whole community.
Right.
And when I go up there, they have a pond that you jump in. You jump in there, you get out, and you feel it, the minerals within my body. They have a well, they're pumping the water up, and it's like there's this brand of water I actually like. I think it's called Artisan or something, or maybe no, it's not. That's not what it's called. But it's like it's kind of a squarish bottle. Kind of looks like Fiji.
Okay. I don't think I know it off the top of my head.
And it's plastic, but
okay.
But when you drink it, you can feel there's like mineral like, and this is like his. Like when I drink the water from his place, I can almost like taste the minerals in there. I don't know if this is bad, but like I feel like I'm like fueling my body. Like I'm drinking, like it's almost like I'm having a Gatorade, but like I'm doing with water.
Right.
And I would love if the world could get to that point, because your skin's better, your hair is better, your nails better, your whole health is better.
Right. It makes a huge difference. Wrapping it in plastic, though, is the part that's really devastating. In fact, the average American, this is one of the problems with it's really cheap. It's really cheap. It's very easy to distribute. It's really lightweight, lots of virtues to it. But there's lots of vices as well. So plastics don't biodegrade, they photodegrade, which means one piece turns into 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, and then it turns into microplastics and nanoplastics. And the average American today is eating or drinking 1 credit card's worth of plastic every single week. So I think the key is, how do we don't have a problem in the United States called if I could only find a faucet. It's really kind of a funny thing when you think about it, but this bottled water industry exists to the tunes of hundreds of billions of dollars globally. And in much of the developed world, finding a faucet is not the problem. The problem is we don't like or we don't trust what's coming out of that faucet. That's what we need to solve for, right? And so nobody's solved for that. So one of the things, the whole reason FloWater exists is because all of these other products on the market are based on technology from 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. And it's just been totally commoditized. And they've been trying to make the cheapest, kind of easiest to deploy equipment in the market, and consumers still don't like it because it doesn't really materially change the taste of tap water. So you look at a water fountain, there's 10 million water fountains in the United States. There's about 6 million 5-gallon jugs, and then there's a couple 3 million point-of-use water coolers. These are these black box water coolers that you commonly see in businesses. And the reality is that those don't change consumer behavior. So our premise behind this was, hey, if we can do something that people taste and trust, 2 issues that people don't drink tap water. If we can find something that people taste and trust more than their favorite bottle of water, then they will change behaviors, right? So I don't think of us as I am on an environmental mission-based agenda, and so is my team. But that is really rooted in the fundamental conviction that every human deserves access to clean drinking water that they can trust. That is a fundamental human right, and that we want to deliver on that. And in the process of that, eliminate single-use plastics. So kind of the premise behind our company ends up being not, hey, don't drink out of a bottle. It's bad for the environment. So drink FloWater. It's really, this is a superior tasting, performing water. You're going to love it. You're going to love the taste of it. It's going to hydrate you better than anything. You're going to drink more water and less soda and other caffeinated products. And then by virtue of getting someone to do something good, they're going to do other things that are less bad, not only for themselves, but also for the environment.
So we have an environmental attorney, Bobby Kennedy, who just got almost elected into office, basically, because through way of Trump, right? He's moving into office, and he made a statement probably about a week and a half ago saying that day one they're cutting the fluoride,
right? Yes,
which created a bit of a debate because as we're talking, most people agree that fluoride on the teeth is generally positive for you, but. And those same people mostly agree that in the body, it's not positive. Right. What are your thoughts on that with RFK saying he's going to take fluoride out of the water system? And do you think he'll actually be able to do it?
Well, fluoride, for the most part, is administered by local municipalities. So he might be able to develop a federal mandate to eliminate it. I think that'll be a little bit challenging in the short term to be able to do that. I think there's a lot of local municipalities that are gonna kick back on that. Part of it is because it's been so embedded in our culture and our ecosystem for so many decades. From a fluoride perspective, I think it's fantastic what RFK is doing in terms of raising awareness around contaminants and things that should not be in our body that are allowed to be there today. So setting aside fluoride for a second, I think just having a heightened level of conversation around this is a good thing, right? Mm-hmm. And this goes back to the Kennedy era of the 60s, where you look at health and fitness and activity levels so much better back in the 60s than they are today. So as it relates to fluoride specifically, you're right. I concur that most people would agree for the teeth, it's a good thing. You don't want it in your body. And I think one of the things that we've done is we've just gotten caught in this trap of, well, the only way to get fluoride to people that need it is just by indoctrinating and infiltrating our entire water supply. And that's not the right solution necessarily. What we really want is contaminant-free water. Same with chlorine. Chlorine, I think, is a good parallel, which is, you got to have chlorine in your water to get it safely transported from, through the pipes from the municipal water treatment to your point of dispense. You really don't want to be drinking chlorine, though. I mean, it disrupts your intestinal flora. You have more serotonin receptors in more serotonin that gets created in your stomach than even you do in your brain. So this is a very, very kind of sensitive biodynamic in your stomach. And chlorine is, bactericidal and bacteriostatic, where it's like actually killing bacteria. It's the job for it that it's set out to do, but you don't want it in your tap water. And so I think this idea of how do we solve this problem of getting fluoride to people that they need it in their mouths? You can do that through dental care. You can do that through toothpaste. You can do that through education. And part of that is to try to drive kind of equality around that issue. That's why it's been put into water and over many decades. There are other ways to solve that problem without just putting fluoride in everything.
Yeah, and I think that RFK is creating a broader awareness about health in general. I went to this restaurant yesterday, and there was a sign on the front door that said, "We've now stopped all seed oils. Our sweet potato fries are no longer vegan because they're not using
Are they using tallow?
They're not using tallow, right? Because tallow is like, I think, quite a bit more expensive to cook with.
Yeah.
But they're using some kind of alternative.
Okay.
And it's fascinating because it's like that's already happening, right? We're a couple weeks in from that announcement.
Right.
And so I think that I'm excited for health to be optimized. I think water, like, is so crucial. And even for me, like, I'll be drinking out of a plastic bottle. I'm like, I know I shouldn't be doing this, but I'm sitting here comparing like the alternative of like tap water, this, that, and I don't know why I've been reluctant to do RO and then remineralize it, because I know that's the alternative everyone says. I think even you told me when we first chatted,
right?
You're like, you got to do this, bro.
Yeah.
So
you should do it. It's a game changer. You know why people don't do it though? I think it's really simple. It's friction. So I used to run a couple tech companies, and in tech, if you're like on a checkout page and it's another second to load the page, like your drop-off rates are disproportionately high. That exists throughout all of our life, right? Whether that's like, and I'll just draw the parallel to water, which is, when we looked at how do we build the most epic FloWater refill station that consumers prefer to bottled water, and what is it that they don't like about water fountains, 5-gallon jugs, water coolers? I'll just give you one simple example. To fill this up at a hydration station, first of all, that stuff is coming in minimally filtered at best. I mean, the TDS is still really high.
You're saying like in the airport,
exactly.
wall.
Yeah, right. So that is dispensing effectively tap water, and that assumes that filter gets changed on time, which is a pretty generous assumption, right? So, but my point is that takes 35 seconds to fill up. So you're often like filling this up, you're filling it up over a trough that people are drinking and slobbering
behind
over.
you, or people waiting.
So like 35 seconds, like in a public place. So making this 10 seconds with a FloWater device where you can fill it up really rapidly. And so that's just an example. And the parallel to that, going back to your specific kind of friction point to like, hey, why haven't you done this in your home? It's because there's really no plug and play option available today that both purifies the water and then remineralizes it. So it requires plumbing, right? So you got to hook it up and you got to set it up, and then you maybe have to hire somebody to do that or move stuff out of the bottom of your sink. And so that, for us, there's an opportunity to move into the consumer landscape with a plug and play device that sits in the countertop, could be plumbed in optionally, maybe not though. And it's like, set it, forget it, you fill it, and you've got FloWater coming out of it. And that's what we've done on the B2B side of things, where we go into hotels, schools, gyms, corporations, schools all across the United States. This is a plug and play device that doesn't require like drilling and drywall removal and infrastructure and all of those things. So I think that is the issue. That's the reason more consumers don't have it. Now, that being said, to your point though, about just this raising level of awareness, just the dialogue now, I mean, for me, I wasn't always so passionate about the environment. I grew up in the Midwest, and I didn't think about drinking out of a Coke bottle or a Pepsi or a Dr. Pepper bottle or a water bottle until I was, later in life. And it was just this level of awareness where you learn something, you do a little bit of recon, you research it, you see the data, you see the facts, and then suddenly it starts it's just like anything, like a seed of idea turns into potentially activity and then driving to something newer, different, and better. And so I think that is what is super regardless of what side of the political spectrum you set on, I think it's really difficult to contest that RFK's raising the level of awareness and conversation, for the most part, can't be anything but a great thing, because it's just causing people to think about it, debate about it, discuss about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know why he gets so much pushback, because the stuff he's talks about is generally pretty logical. I think it's like, if I were to make some guesses, it could be because he's challenging a really massive industry. Right? He's challenging big pharma. He's challenging, big fast food companies, right?
For sure.
And I wanted to ask you. I know that you have some experience with a pharmaceutical company, right?
I do.
Like
Yeah,
pharmaceuticals.
Before that, I started my career at Johnson & Johnson and Eli Lilly. So,
so were you when you were with J&J and Eli Lilly, were you doing pharmaceuticals there?
I was.
Okay.
Yeah. So I worked in I did institutional and office sales when I was at J&J, selling anti-infectives, doing things with hospitals and formularies and anti-infectives as well as analgesics. And then when I was 24, I moved over to work in marketing in-house at Eli Lilly. So I was one of the few 24-year-old dudes working on a drug for peri and postmenopausal osteoporosis. So I know more about menopause, or I knew more about menopause than most 24-year-old dudes did, and did that for several years as well. So we launched that product back in, whatever it was, 1999 or so, which is now $1 billion drug. But I spent years in pharma biotech after that as well, and then completely jumped out of that arena into natural products, and then kind of even precursor to natural products, water. 70% of Americans, or 70% of people, are made up of water, and so kind of moved to the most base layer from a very pharmaceutical layer early in my career.
Now, do you think that this push to put these chemicals into water and the way we've ended up with microplastics and all this stuff, is it intentional or just like accidental ignorance?
By big beverage companies?
Is there some secret agenda of the elite sitting in a corner thinking we're going to poison these people so their brains and their pineal glands can't think and all this stuff?
Well, here's what I would say. Short answer is I don't know. I think this is like one of those things too, that even that question 10 years ago just wouldn't even be contemplated, right? I feel like in many ways, other than by like the most extreme conspiracy theorists. Now people are like, hey,
Alex Jones is like, they're poisoning the water.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. That would have been Alex Jones and then like 10 other people 10 years ago. Now I think people do really wonder, like, hey, what is the reason behind this? And so, I think like, I don't know that I could go that far in an extreme to conjure the believability of that. However, what I would say is, you look at a lot of big tobacco companies and cigarette companies own food companies. And of course they are using the same technology, the same addictive chemicals or derivative addictive chemicals, and putting that into food supply. And so there's a reason why whatever your favorite snack is so insanely addictive. Like there is a reason for that. And it's not unknown to the companies that are manufacturing it. I mean, they are profiting off of that. And so I feel like it's a real opportunity for us to revolt in many ways and go back to natural, organic, like God-intended products for us to restore and unshackle our health and our freedom. And so I think we've, I compare big beverage companies very much to big tobacco in the 60s and 70s. And I said that earlier. But there's a lot of reasons why, and one of those is because of the chemically addictive properties that have been effectively like instilled into the production of just both food as well as beverage products. I would tell you though that it goes back to, and there were some previously redacted data and internal data from big oil companies in the 70s and 80s where they knew that recycling was totally bunk. Like they knew it was complete bullshit. And so it was redacted and then it got released a few years ago, or at least the releases were what I saw from a few years ago. And they knew it was just going to be a marketing shtick. I mean, there's no better marketer than someone at big oil or, big tobacco, predating that, big oil, big bottled water, big beverage companies. I mean, those guys are fantastic marketers and they're really manipulative in many ways. And so when I look at that, it does raise a lot of questions as to like, well, what was the origin of it? What was the genesis? What was the intention? For sure to profit off of basically this recycling lie. And so recycling is another great example, right? You know what recycling rates are in the United States?
Probably like 20%.
Yeah, that's a great guess. It's right around 20%. So many decades. So big oil started this whole bullshit around recycling, and then you've got packaged goods companies and big beverage companies and big bottled water companies that are propagating that lie. And so then there was all this education around recycling. And part of the reason for that is because people believe that products actually get recycled. And the data shows, even in places like San Francisco, where I lived for 10 years, I lived in the Bay for 10 years. I was in the environmental ecosystem.
Do you guys have like 10 bins there? Like one for...
yeah, I know. I mean, good luck getting it in the right bin. Yeah, there's like at least half a dozen bins if you kind of get specific enough. And here's the amazing thing. You throw it in the blue bin, so the vast majority of people don't throw it in the blue bin, right? And then even if you throw it in the blue bin, the vast majority of that doesn't make its way through the reclamation and the recycling process. So it's as if you never threw it in the blue bin to begin with. And so the people that have loved keeping that lie alive are the people profiting from that. And that's big beverage companies and big bottled water companies. And so now this is a great thing, like raising the level of awareness. Like 10 years ago, when we started this company, I used to circulate every time there was an article on plastics and water, I used to circulate it to the whole team because it never happened. Like there was an article every 3 or 4 or 5 months, right? Now when I can't even keep up reading the articles, let alone circulating articles, because it's in our LinkedIn feed, Facebook feed, Twitter feeds. And so there's a raising level of awareness, which is a great thing. And this is why, like when you go into a hotel today, I'm dealing with numerous, whether it's schools or hospitality, I deal with numerous people on the hospitality side at the corporate levels, and was just meeting with an ownership group here in, not here, but in Napa, California a couple days ago or yesterday morning. And so one of the things that they are saying is, hey, we got to get these plastics out of the environment. Like consumers don't want to walk into a room. It's like walking into a room and seeing a pack of cigarettes there. Like you would never do that. 30 years ago, it wouldn't have been that weird. Wouldn't have been weird to see a cigarette machine. I haven't seen a cigarette machine in 10, 20 years. But to see a single-use environmental cigarette in the form of wrapped in plastic, that's becoming really distasteful. And so this is a good movement that's happening right now. That's only going to take steam over the next 5, 10 years. I think it's going to be next 2, 3 years where we're going to see the greatest amount of impact.
My family comes down to visit me. They're from Canada in Vancouver, and they also have the multi-bin system. You got to put your organics over here, inorganics, all this stuff. And they come to my house, and I have one bin.
Yeah.
So and
do they educate you?
They
or
encourage? The most recent time they came down, they're like, "Well, Dylan, where's your recycling?" I was like, "Well, it's in the garage. You can walk in there and put it in there if you want." They're like, "Okay, sounds good." But I would occasionally put recycling in the garbage bin, right? Then they started grilling me on it, and I pulled up a picture of India and just showed them like what it looks like there. I'm like, do you think that me putting this bottle in this trash can is, and I don't know, maybe that's the wrong mindset to have.
Well, I think it's a pretty typical mindset. Here's what, it's a little bit like voting though. I think when I see somebody, like literally if everyone just used one less single-use plastic water bottle, we'd see a 50%. Or we'd see a major reduction. I mean, if they used half as many, it wouldn't be that hard for someone to cut their single-use plastic consumption in half. To get it to zero, I mean, that feels like a pipe dream today, right? Like that seems like, okay, that's impossible. But if I were to just say, hey, could I actually reduce my plastic consumption by 50%? Like for example, if you installed a home system, right, and you just stopped drinking bottled water altogether, it actually wouldn't be that much friction to do it. But it does make a difference, right? I mean, this is one of those things where today, like again, just going back to this milestone of 1 billion bottles saved. I mean, that's 1 billion FloWater.
Is that
fills.
today?
Literally, it's today. I just announced it on LinkedIn like 2 hours ago, and so our team's announcing it. But literally, it's just like coming into this. That's one of the reasons why I was a few minutes late. Actually, is finishing curating my post. And so it does make a difference. And I think it's like voting, like going back to my comment about voting, which is I think a lot of people, sitting in Colorado, I live in Denver, Colorado, or if you're in Ohio or wherever you are in the United States, everybody should vote. I'm not saying who you should vote for. I don't care who you vote for. I think this idea of kind of like really levying your right to have a voice is really important. I think it's also important for us just in terms of like, self-accountability and then having some feeling of being able to have control over our destiny and drive our destiny. So I think in that sense too, something changes in our mindset when we can actually grab something and choose to do something different, right? It's like little things lead to big things, and doing hard things well make other hard things easier to do. Like that's the data, right? You do a hard thing and you accomplish it. The next hard thing actually gets easier. The reverse is true as well, which is if you don't do a hard thing, then the easier thing actually gets harder to do, right? It's self-fulfilling in some ways. And so something as simple as like making meaningful steps, I think it does make a difference. It makes a difference in terms of what ends up in the environment, but it also makes a difference in our lives.
What do you do when you travel?
Work, drink water, drink a lot of water.
Specifically when it comes to water.
Yeah.
Like you're staying in a hotel that doesn't have your machines.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have one at your house. Do you have?
I do. Yeah. I actually have a little bit of a funny story about that, by the way. I'll just tell you real quickly. I was dealing with someone. I was talking to a friend of mine who used to be a CMO at like some big time companies. And this is like 7-8 years ago. So we were like 2-3 years into FloWater. And she's like, hey, do you have a FloWater in your house? I'm like, no. I was like, I'm not going to get one until we have the resources so that every single employee can have a FloWater in their home. And, you know, I used to think that was like really egalitarian. I did that like with pure intentions. I was like very genuine. And I finished like telling her this spiel thinking she was going to like find it to be, you know, like
endearing or something.
Yeah, exactly. Endearing and like supportive. She looks at me and she's like, that is the dumbest effing thing I've ever heard you say. She's like, do you think Steve Jobs would have waited to get an iPhone until everybody could have an iPhone? And I never thought of it that way. So the next week I got a FloWater installed in my house. And it was, so it's a game changer to have in your house. And we do have a program where employees can have access to a FloWater system, particularly at years of service or some derivative unit through one of our partner companies or our parent company, Blue Water. But on the road, gosh, well, I've been super fortunate this trip. I have gone from hotel to hotel to hotel unknowingly, by the way. I just booked the rooms based on proximity and price.
Based on the FloWater machine.
I didn't actually. And there were FloWater machines at each of the hotels I've stayed at, which is so epic when that happens. I mean, I look forward to the day when I can do that reliably across the entire United States. So that actually has happened in the last 3 hotels that I've stayed at where I had this random, unexpected FloWater sighting. But I'll go to Starbucks. I'll go and get triple filtered. So Starbucks is a good bet when I'm on the road. So like I'm on my way back to the hotel today. I'll probably stop by a Starbucks.
Do you have to request it or? Just...
Yeah. So I'll go. Well, the coffee that they typically brew, like especially in Las Vegas, like you guys have really tough tasting water here. Like you got to be a real, like this puts hair on your chest. The water here, the tap water does, and so. I go and ask for. They typically triple filter across the United States or water, and so
if I ask for a cup of water. Is it tap water or is it filtered water?
It's filtered water. It should be filtered water. Yeah. So that's like my go-to when I'm on the road. I'll stop in a Starbucks or I'll stop in a location. Like, so there's a bunch.
It generally tastes pretty good. I never considered that. I just assumed it was tap water.
So like 80% of the taste of coffee actually is attributed to the actual quality of the water itself. And so someday I believe we'll end up having Starbucks brewed with FloWater. So like people are going to start to differentiate their beverage based on the source water that goes in it. And so that's going to be something that I believe happens someday because people are doing differentiation based on what side of the mountain the coffee is grown on, in the shade, and like what farmer grew it. And those things are all really cool and really important, impactful to the taste of the coffee. But if you look at something like water is a huge determinant in the taste of the coffee, and you actually want it to be remineralized, the better. There's an 2-to-1 ratio, magnesium and calcium makes for perfect tasting coffee. That's like kind of some coffee science. But that's what I typically do on the road if I can't find a FloWater machine. Though I will very intentionally, like we've got a bunch of national brands, hospitality, fitness that have FloWater embedded. And so I'll go to one of our partner companies. Yeah, I'll just do it.
Mooching the water.
I do like a little huddle and a little meet and greet and shake hands and kiss babies and whatnot. And then I also fill my bottle on the way out. And so I'll do that. But it's tough when you're on the road. And this is the problem that we have in the US. So again, it just goes back to, we don't have a problem called if I could only find a faucet. The problem is you cannot either, you don't like the taste or you don't trust what's coming out of that faucet, and for good reason. And so we have a problem today in the US where we need to rebuild water infrastructure before we can actually rebuild water infrastructure, because that'll take 30, 50 years. So we need to be able to kind of put, what we're trying to do is just change the last 6 feet of water line, right? So we're trying to effectively radically change that incoming tap water in the last 6 feet. And that's what has to happen in the United States while we're working all of these other things too. All these other things like what RFK is talking about, water infrastructure, putting money into water infrastructure, those things matter. By the way, one other stat that I'll mention to you, this is absolutely tragic, but if you look at most of the data, the poorer you are and the darker your skin, the dirtier your water. It is absolutely catastrophically tragic. And again, going back to this fundamental conviction that we have that every single human deserves access to clean drinking water, not just the people that have nice homes and nice zip codes, right? I mean, that is absolutely tragic that occurs today. And so all of these things really need time and attention so that we can solve a structural issue that fundamentally changes the face of human health going forward.
Wow. With that being said, I don't know if it's your machine or someone else's, but when I've used it in hotels, I found it to be very, very, very cold.
Mm-hmm.
Are you guys chilling it? Like
we do.
I like water at room temperature.
Yeah.
And so for me, I can't like guzzle that cold water.
Right.
Is there an idea or a solution for that?
Yeah, there is. You know, in fact, I'm the same way. Like if I could have my pick, you'd think, hey, you run a water company, you should be able to have your pick. Like go just design it and have it be ambient temperature water. I'll come back to that in a second. But what I typically do is I'll fill up and I'll let it sit out. Oftentimes will not use vessels that are double insulated because I like it to get the room temperature as quickly as possible because I can just drink more of it. So I typically drink a gallon of water a day. So I'll fill up a gallon jug and then I will let it sit.
In a plastic jug?
No, not a plastic jug. No, yeah, not a plastic jug. And then I will end up letting that sit during the course of the day in like it's room temperature during the day. And sometimes I'll put some extra minerals or a little bit of extra salt in that, even though the FloWater stuff ends up remineralizing all of it. I might just do a little bit extra, especially if I'm working out hard that day. And then I just use that to fill this vessel. And I kind of keep that gallon, that's my visual measurement of how I'm doing for the day to drink my gallon. The reason the FloWater doesn't have it, I mean, there's a lot of things that this system does. I mean, we spent millions of dollars building in and millions of dollars of resources and working with a manufacturer and industrial design team in California. We spent a lot of time working on how do we build the world's best tasting and most trusted water dispensing device that anyone's ever seen. So we basically, broke down water fountains, 5-gallon jugs, water coolers. We looked at bottled water. We looked at the attributes of bottled water. We did tons of consumer taste testing. The one thing that's really tricky is making FloWater taking all of that technology in the machine and then adding ambient temperature to it is a little bit tricky, right? Just because of the way that the machine processes water. So we'll do cold water, which is chilled. I mean, like chilled to 38, 39 degrees. And then we'll also do hot water. The ambient is a little bit trickier to do. Sometimes I'll just take the hot water and the cold water.
Yeah, you can't just have like a
blend. It's a little, believe it or not, like that's one of the more difficult
things. Like a soda fountain, how it comes out with the syrup?
I know, you'd think you'd be able to balance it. We'll do that in the next year or two though. We'll have something that's ambient, but it was a bigger development project than we anticipated to be able to do that. Same with carbonation. I mean, most people, there's a lot of things I don't love about carbonation. One is it's generally more acidic. 2 is it's not good for your teeth. 3, it's not necessarily the best for your stomach. So like I'll drink carbonated water on occasion, like kind of as a treat. But as a daily drink, ideally you're not drinking carbonated water. But like carbonating, that's one of the reasons why we haven't carbonated the FloWater machine. But the other part of it is the most important thing that we do is purify and completely make pristine that tap water. And so kind of the other form factors after that are things that we need to develop over time that are just a little bit more complicated.
Now, with that being said, there's like, I've seen this kid on Instagram, for example, who he reviews water and he goes and tests it. I don't know if you've seen it.
I know he's blown up over the last, he just started that Instagram page. I can't remember his name right now. He just started the Instagram page like a year and a half, 2 years ago.
You know why it's blowing up? Because it basically every water comes back is don't drink this. It's toxic, right? And I think that society as a whole, looking at water, it's like, what the heck do I do? Like, and there's all these other things. You can't have this in life. You can't have seed oils now. You can't have this.
Right.
Like, where do you see water in the kind of like, I'm trying to optimize my health? Where should someone start with that? Or should they get to the gym and lose 10 pounds first?
I think the best thing someone should do is focus on sleep. Number one.
Unless you're a big company with many locations and interested in having FloWater.
I'm literally going through my like tree. And then the second one is hydration and then food and then exercise comes after. I mean, if someone's like literally like asking me genuinely, how would I optimize my health? I would focus, and these are like simple things to do. Now they're hard to execute. I mean, some of the best things in life are hard to execute, right? And so actually one of my comments to the team just in the last few days around this billion bottles saved milestone is, startup streets around the world are riddled with companies that had great ideas and failed to execute. And so I'm so proud of the team of 70 people that are with us today, but also all the people that have been with us along the way, and the advocates, partners, investors, advisors, manufacturers, to get us to where we are today. So really grateful for that. But execution is really difficult. And so if we're looking at those things that are like kind of the tree of life, so to speak, physiologically, sleep, water, food, and exercise, and solving your water issue is a major component to all of that. I mean, if you look at one of the reasons that people overeat and they have cravings because they're dehydrated. 70% of Americans are chronically dehydrated. That stat is across the globe too, by the way. And it's both men and women equally, and it's adults as well as children. So your body, in some cases, it's craving hydration, and you get a food craving, but it's really, there's moisture and there's water and food products as well. And so that's like where some people actually get the bulk amount of their daily hydration is just by eating their hydration instead of drinking it. And so if you look at like solving that problem, and then it also ties to the restful sleep, like all of these things actually tie together, and water is at the epicenter of it.
So you're crazy successful in your previous life. Like you
well, I don't know that I would say crazy. I mean, I would say I had some good runs. I've had like wins and losses along the way. I don't know that I could agree with the crazy successful, but thank you.
I mean, you definitely could have done a lot of things, and you chose to do this.
Yes.
It's a lot, I'm sure. You're challenging a lot of frameworks. You're creating a big mission. Like, why are you doing this? And why not just go work for some big tech company, be CEO, get a nice chunky salary, and,
Yeah. I had that crossroads 12 years ago. And the moment that changed everything for me was tied back to both a personal story and a story with my daughters. So I've got two daughters. They're 21 and 22 now. Their names are Royce and Zoe. They're amazing. And they were like 9 and 10 at the time. And I went to a soccer game of theirs, and I saw them drinking, like Red Bulls and Cokes and Pepsis and Dr. Peppers and energy drinks and eating all these sugary snacks. And it just dawned on me, and it wasn't just one moment of an epiphany. It just turned into like a 4 to 6 week exploration and investigation. But what I learned in that process was literally our kids are getting programmed. I got programmed. So like my personal story on this is that I drank, I can't tell you how much soda I drank when I was a kid. Like I didn't drink, I drank sometimes from a hose. Otherwise I was drinking soda. Like I was drinking carbonated, sugary, caffeinated crap. And that worked fine for me because I was athletic, and then I played football through college and could eat and drink whatever I wanted. I don't mean like alcoholic stuff. I just mean like, soda. And then, just to give you frame of reference, I'm like 210 pounds now. I ballooned to like 270 when I was like 25, 27 years old. So I basically just stopped playing sports, stopping working out, didn't have two-a-days, didn't have football, all that stuff. I literally drank myself into obesity through soda primarily. And that was a real big epiphany, which is like I had my own personal experience, and then I dropped all that weight and started working out, cut out all the soda, started drinking water again. This is even pre-FloWater. And then I saw my kids getting programmed the same way. I mean, if you look at like going back to that stat that I told you about the poorer you are, generally the worse your water quality is. Well, what I didn't tell you, but is also true, is that a lot of these big beverage companies, what they do is they target those communities because they have higher long-term, more profitable customers, because they get them addicted. They have already bad water to choose from, so they don't want to choose that and they don't want to drink that. And then they're easier to loop in and get addicted to effectively, sugary, carbonated, caffeinated drinks. And they become super profitable long-term customers to them. So they have like this double whammy that's occurring to them. And it was at that moment where I said, you know what, I want to go from being a mercenary to a missionary. And rather than chase, all of us as tech entrepreneurs are always kind of chasing these billion-dollar exits. Like what you don't see on Instagram and Facebook is that most of them don't happen. But you kind of have this perception, and that's what every investor in Valley wants, is they want a unicorn, right? If they're investing in the tech company. And I went from that to saying, hey, I want to dedicate my life's work to saving billions of bottles and getting billions of people to fill with FloWater to do something drastic for the health. And in the process of doing well, we can also do good. So this ends up being fully a mission orientation for me and the team. And so, yeah, I want to do well, and I want to be successful, and I want to have contributions. But my desire for contributions have spanned from like living in this tech world to wanting to do something dramatically transformative to tap water that changes the face of society through a simple thing. and having an impact in that.
And I love it. Thank you for coming on. This has been good. Anything else you want to share before we wrap up?
I'm grateful to be here. I would just go back to do a little bit of recon. If people are watching this, not everyone has time to become I've spent 12 years becoming an expert in this. So ChatGPT in 90 seconds can give you a little bit of a summary of the problems with tap water and why you shouldn't be drinking it. And I think the thing that I would just advocate for and ask people to do it is drive the change that you want to see, right? So when you send your kid to school, ask your kid's school to do something about their tap water. There's no federal mandate on lead testing in schools. That's absolutely an atrocity. So that happens in the next couple of years. It should be happening today. Like someone should snap their fingers and make that happen today, because kids today are drinking lead in their tap water. And so you send your kid to school, you expect safety as well as education and assistance and all these other things. And so things change only when we demand the change, right? So if you are in an opportunity as a leader of a company where you can drive that change in your organization, I would advocate and ask that you do it, right? If you're a parent or you're going to a gym or you're purveying a hotel, make the request for the change that you want to see happen. And that's how we're going to drive this. It's not just going to be someone's goodwill that's sitting in 4 rooms, like pushing pencils that's going to do that. They're going to execute what the consumer's desire and demand is. And that's the change that we can drive.
Dude, thanks so much for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me on. It's been great.